I'm Jason Thompson. Welcome to the Jasonisms. As I mentioned, the Jasonisms feel a little bit arrogant, but hopefully they're helpful to you. It's okay to rib me about it if you think it's too much, but they're just little short tidbits of things I've learned over the years, and these are little sayings that I try to use. So, in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the things I always tell people is the biggest challenge for diversity is unrealistic expectations. And I can tell a story of years ago. As many people know, I worked in the U.S. Olympic Committee. I helped launch their diversity program. And during that point, the head of HR came to me and said, Jason, you know what our diversity goal should be? 30% in 3 years. 30% of all our employees should be people of color. And again, sound like a great idea. But I realized in that process, it was mathematically impossible. And you'll see, like in the book and the CAPE technique, that's what I learned is that people are setting these unrealistic expectations that cannot be achieved. And what happens is then they holds it against you as a chief diversity officer. So a good example of this is 30%. And the reason 30% couldn't be achieved is the organization was also very proud of they had 10% turnover. Well, if you only have 10% turnover, you can't get to 30% because you need people to leave and have to leave at a high rate. No one wants people leaving at a high rate. And in fact, it had to increase like 50 or 60%. I mean, it was this unrealistic number. I was like, we're never going to get to that number and we're never going to get to that goal. But it was again, and see this all the time. People think, well, people of color make up 30 or 40% of the world. Shouldn't it be 30 or 40% of our company? In theory, but that expectation is unrealistic because you have to have high turnover. And whenever I go to an organization that has high turnover, they're not functioning very highly, right? Typically, that means something went wrong. That's the only reason you turn over a lot of people, only reason you turn over a lot of leaders. And this is helpful too when you think about diversity in leadership. People are always, oh, you're not committed to diversity because there's no diversity in your leadership. You'd have to have high turnover in your leadership team to see that kind of change in diversity. I mean, I've worked at organizations where you're there for 3 or 4 years. You might have one vice president leave in 3 or 4 years. Why? Because it takes a long time to get that job. So people don't leave quickly. If they do leave quickly, it's because they're terrible. Generally, that quick turnover isn't indicative of a good organization. It means something's wrong. So again, unrealistic expectations, that's going to be your biggest challenge. And many times you need to know how to set the goals and take the time to do that. And obviously in other parts of the book, you can see that because we do the math for you and show you how to set the math up. But that's something that's going to be really important because many times, and unfortunately, you get it from all sides. People who support diversity many times don't understand how this works. And so for them, they'll push on you all the time. Like ERGs are always like, oh, should be more diversity in leadership team. I'm like, of course there should be, but it doesn't turn over that fast. And if it did, something would be wrong. So we got to be able to explain that and then also realize many times the expectations are so unrealistic, you can't achieve them.